So we've established in this chapter that the brain and the nervous system does prefer glucose as its main fuel, and the red blood cells can only use glucose as their fuel. So what happens when the body runs out of carbohydrate? What happens when we don't need enough carbohydrate, eat enough carbohydrate, and we're running low? So the body has a few adaptations in this case. So protein can be converted to glucose so that the body can use that glucose for the thing that's critical functions, like for the brain and for the red blood cells. But this is kind of an expensive thing for the body to do because it diverts protein from its own critical functions, like maintaining our immune system, maintaining our muscle mass. And the other body functions that protein's used for. So in order to prevent the use of protein for energy, this would be called protein sparing, eating enough carbohydrate to prevent the use of protein for energy. And of course, there's another nutrient that the body can use for fuel, and that's fat. So the body can use fat for fuel to power its activities like walking, doing any kind of physical activity that you'd like to do. But remember, the brain prefers glucose as its preferred fuel, and the red blood cells can only use glucose. So the body has a second adaptation to convert fat to a compound known as ketone bodies. And then those ketone bodies can be used by some areas of the brain, but not all. Certain areas of the brain still rely on glucose. And then remember, the red blood cells also rely on glucose. So some protein must still be used to make the glucose for those areas of the brain and the red blood cells to function. When those ketone bodies accumulate in the blood, this is known as what's called ketosis. You've probably heard of the keto diet, and that's what's happening here. So those ketone bodies are providing that alternative fuel source as glucose for the brain and the nerve cells when the glucose is lacking. The keto diet is a very low carbohydrate diet, just like any of the older low carbohydrate diets like the Atkins diet, the Dukan diet, etc. But the ketogenic diet was actually been around for a long time. It's used therapeutically in children and adults with epilepsy, and it's seen to prevent seizures in those people. That doesn't necessarily mean the ketogenic diet is right for sustained weight loss, but it can be therapeutic for people with epilepsy. So to summarize, without glucose in the form of carbohydrates in the diet, the body is forced to alter its use of protein and fat. Protein can be converted to glucose for use by the brain and the red blood cells. Fat is converted to ketone bodies, some of areas of which the brain can use, but the red blood cells and parts of the brain, again, still rely on glucose.